So this is my video for the Unit 4 Heredity test correction. So the prompt I chose was the FRQ from 2010, question 3. And basically this is the problem broken up into 2 slides. So if you want to freeze it and look at it, or just look up the question yourself, basically this gives context to the 3 parts of the problem. So this is the 3 crosses that it's referring to in the second slide, and basically that's all the data that they give you and want you to interpret. So here's the actual questions. It's broken into 3 parts, so I'm going to go through each part in different slides. So for part A, what conclusions can be drawn from cross 1 and cross 2? Explain how the data supports your conclusions for each cross. So basically what you have to know for this question is how to make a Punnett square, how to interpret that Punnett square, and based on that interpretation, what genes will be dominant and recessive based on the offspring, what the different ratios mean basically, and how the alleles for the different types of traits and ratios, like how to interpret whether it's homogeneous or homogeneous or heterozygous. So for part A, my conclusions were, for cross 1, the bronze fly or the bronze eye color is a dominant trait, while the red is a recessive, and that's indicated by the ratio of a 3:1, meaning if you have 4 offspring, 3 of them will have bronze eyes while 1 will have red. And that means when you're drawing the Punnett square, obviously 3 of the squares will have the dominant bronze allele in it, and 1 will have two alleles for the red, meaning it's homogeneous for red. My conclusions for cross 2 are that the stunted wings are dominant to the recessive normal wings, and that's also indicated by the 3:1 ratio. And obviously that means the same thing, where you have in 3 of the 4 Punnett squares you'll have the stunted allele in 3 of those squares, meaning that it's going to be dominant to whatever other allele is in there. And then for the fourth square in the Punnett square, you're going to have a normal wing gene, but it's going to be homogeneous, meaning there's going to be 2 of those alleles. So for part B, what conclusions can be drawn about cross 3? So what you have to know about, or know for this part of the question, is how to interpret multiple traits and how they act with one another. And also you have to use your knowledge from the prior question based on what gene is dominant and which one is recessive. And also you have to understand the new ratios that are being given based on the data. So my conclusions for cross 3 are, we can conclude that the genes are possibly linked by reviewing the number of males and females according to which physical characteristics they display. So for example, we see that there's a higher number of flies which have both dominant traits, and the 2 dominant traits were bronze and stunted wings, and that there is an equally high number of flies which display both recessive traits, and the recessive traits were red eyes and normal wings. However, the number of flies which have 1 dominant trait and 1 recessive trait is much lower. So that would be like a fly with bronze eyes but normal wings, or red eyes with stunted wings. So that means there's an uneven 1:1:1 ratio, 1:1:1:1 ratio, which indicates that there's gene linkage occurring. So for part C, identify and discuss 2 different factors that would affect whether the island's fly population is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium for the traits above. So what you have to know for this is what Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is, how to apply the given data to the prior knowledge, and recalling 2 factors which can apply to the scenario in which you can also defend. So the 2 factors I chose: factor 1, whether mutations of the genes occur will affect the equilibrium, or basically it's going to refer to mutations that occur. So if no mutations occur, then there will be no change to alleles of the genes, therefore keeping the island stable. But if there is a mutation, it would change the ratio because it would add a new allele to the island population. And then my second factor is whether or not natural selection occurs. So if specific genes are favored over others, then the genes that are favored will be passed on, but the genes that are not favored will be phased out, which will obviously lead to more dominant or more seen genes on the island. So overall, I think doing this question gave me more practice on how to construct and understand a Punnett square, and also how to apply my knowledge of the ratios. It also gave me a better understanding of the different factors which can affect the F2 generations, and also how we can use Punnett squares to predict offspring, like in reference to dominant or recessive genes. I don't think there were really any misconceptions I had about this unit, but if there was one misconception, it would be how gene linkage occurs and how to identify it in a problem like this one. And that's the end.